Hello, my name's Alec. I am the technical manager at Quellfire, and welcome to another episode of Burning Questions. This is actually episode 24, so it's been a long-running series. And in this episode, I'm kindly joined from Josh, who's going to be helping me with sort of considerations from an MEP aspect, because it's quite a unique thing that we've not really focused on too much. So first of all, thank you for joining us, Josh. For anyone that's not aware, if you could just introduce yourself, sort of what your role is, your job, and sort of like your expertise, please.
My name is Josh Estrada. I'm the director of Estrada Building Services. I'm an MEP contractor. We carry out all types of MEP installations, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and coordinations between AOV contractors, sprinklers specialists, and in new build residentials.
Oh, perfect. And this is the reason why we wanted Josh involved in this episode for today. So the Building Safety Act has been introduced now. We've had a few stages. The changes that have been sort of implemented have been very heavily focused on designing buildings prior to the construction stage. So that's rather than the current theme that used to be design whilst build. So have any of these changes impacted the way MEP services are designed into buildings?
Yeah, so before where we was as MEP contractors, we sort of took the contract as stage 4 or stage 5 of the design stages. Now we're having to sort of do early coordination from stage 2 or 3, and then take it all the way up to stage 5.
Yeah,
and sort of the big impact is not just the design element; it's the fact that you have to do technical submittals for the products that you will be using, which is something that it wasn't done before. Before you had your design, even if it was stage 4 or 5, your technical submittals for materials, they weren't done yet. So now, taking it from stage 2, 3, all that sort of aspect of what materials you're going to be using, whether it's concrete screws, containment, pipework, insulation, everything needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah.
And submitted as part of sort of the Gateway 2 stage.
Okay, yeah, which is one of the big changes of the Gateway 2 system submission over everything. So, so it's an interesting point you actually raised there about the sort of REBA stages and when to be brought in, because very often we were brought in at say stage 5 as a passive fire manufacturer, and in my opinion, it's way too late. And I agree that I think the more emphasis now is on the stage 2 and 3 aspect of it. So, especially because Quellfire predominantly deal with service penetrations, I think it's really important that we discuss with the MEP at the start what sort of requirements are needed, and we need to know what you guys, or what the project's intending to use. So where services cross compartmentation lines, say a fire rated wall, for example, the services, be it the cable tray or the pipes, they have to include a fire rated seal. So how important is it for MEP designers to liaise with relevant parties to ensure that they're compliant with all the building regulations?
So with fire tested seals, systems like Quellfire is the early coordination in regards of sort of what spacing you guys have actually tested for.
Yeah.
It could be 30 mil, 40 mil between pipework, across a letterbox or into a riser, that, and sort of the requirement for the metallic fixing points on either side of the letterbox, all those requirements and sort of will need to be coordinated so early and sort of identify, what the potential issues are going to be, because you will limited with space. And then this is why sort of for us and sort of for all the projects I worked on, is Quellfire is the preferred choice, because you guys are sort of doing real life scenario testing, as MEP contractors, what we're actually installing on the job. And that's something, Quellfire is doing.
We try our hardest, because obviously it's not an area that we, even though we do passive fire protection for services, how they're used or installed and limitations and stuff like that is not really our area. That's why we speak to people like yourself to get that feedback of how things are being installed, how they're used, and the limitations. So another interesting thing I think sort of said earlier as well is obviously the systems now, you're inputting a lot of technical submittal at the start, and a lot of the systems, especially from your aspect, can be very complex side of things. So with that in mind, are there any sort of factors for architects and design teams that they should be aware of with MEP services? Any factors that might affect them?
I mean, there's certain elements that seems to be a common problem across sort of every job that we do, and it's items like air brakes, for ventilation. The designers tend to design it so it's close to the soffit, but you have to take into consideration that now we need to make sure that the seal, if a fire tested seal is required around there, there is enough space between the soffit and the top of the air brake to be able to maintain a proper seal. So air brake for ventilation, district heating pipework. For district heating pipework, sort of whichever company is going to adopt the system, they tend to have strict rules of how they want the pipework to be installed. And then, one of the common ones is the fact that they don't want the pipework to sort of do any sets. And the reason for that is for airlocks. So then, when you're designing the building, you need to make sure that pipe, you can't be allowing to go over services. That needs to take priority. And so, the pipe will start at high level and sort of drop into the utility cupboard. Another item that I think is quite crucial, and again, it's a common mistake, I'll say, sort of at design stage, is the fact that fire-rated ductwork, the dampers have only been tested in certain orientations. So you have a fire damper that is 450 by 450, and then that has only been tested like in the vertical position, for example. So you can't assume that opening can also be used on a horizontal position. And then that would allow you to sort of, design the fire-rated ductwork with the right plenum to connect to the right damper that's required in those scenarios. And sort of the architects need to be aware of which dampers are available in the market that have the test data and sort of their requirements for it.
Yeah. It can be quite challenging. I said, there's quite a lot now to sort of think about because, the modern methods of construction are changing all the time, the wall types and that. And I know on some of the projects I work, dampers and fire-rated ductwork can be quite challenging for the MEP designers for space restrictions. Everyone seems to be wanting to have very limited space and lots of service types. But it's good. I mean, some of the factors I've been made aware of working with MEP designers is things that's impacted our testing. So the thickness of thermal insulation wasn't something we considered. So we've done thicker phenolic to try and match the requirements that are starting to appear on projects. And we're actually looking at testing thinner insulation because we tend to just worry about the big pipes in our testing. And actually, when you've got a small 15mm copper pipe, you don't want 50mm thickness insulation. It's a bit overkill and stuff like that. So it's that feedback that's helped us out and everything as well. So it's good to see those challenges being mentioned.
And another thing I would add is, in apartments, like duplexes or houses, sometimes, or even flats, sometimes you've got a fire-rated corridor, and then there tends to be an issue where the drainage goes through a fire-rated wall, sort of diagonally.
Yes.
And then I don't think there is test data for that. I think it needs to sort of penetrate straight.
Yeah. Well, we've got some stuff, for example. So we've done some sort of 110s where they're angled, or where they sort of come out the wall with the elbow, the knee joint, as I'd say, or the coupling. So we've done some testing, but it does have an effect on the fire performance. So where the pipe would go straight through the wall and may get 2 hours, actually putting it at an angle can reduce it down to 60 minutes. So there is an impact there. So again, it comes down to the requirements of the project and the ease of installation, because the harder these services go on the wall, it's hard enough for the MEP to install it in those tight spaces, and then to expect the fire stopping contract to come along and do it as well. It's a tricky thing to do. So but it's better to work that out at design stage than to build it, run, everything gets done, then you haven't got, ceilings start going up and everything, and then they go, oh, we can't do this. And it's just, that's where I find the design stage questions much easier than the build side of things. So,
Yeah, because this is sort of at the moment what's happening is, we're building it because there's no walls. We're installing the sort of services, like the drainage now.
Yeah.
And then, as the building the walls are like, by the way, you need to straighten this pipe. And then, but yeah, sort of at design stage, early coordination with, Qualifier or the MEP contractor would highlight these issues early on, and then you can sort of design it properly.
Do it properly, and make allowances. It is happening quite a lot on quite a lot of the projects now. I think, especially for the design teams, where the MEP's been given a set of golden rules. Not just us, because like you said, you mentioned dampers. They have very, very specific information. But then you've got the doors, because you've got to watch out for the door jams. Walls have restrictions on spacing between apertures and how close to the soffit. Then if you want service, like you mentioned, services close to the soffit, there's deflection requirement. There's lots of things that all have to merge together. So to think that one person can do it and you're going to build it and then it be all okay is quite crazy, in my opinion, type thing.
Yeah. I know it's definitely a complex topic, and
it's definitely
sort of working together is how we're going to achieve this.
So that actually leads on quite nicely to one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Josh, was, and we already highlighted a few there, is the challenges. Are there any challenges that you've been seeing, even just with doing it the new process, or just in general with the services and information out there available?
I would say the real life challenges would be sort of the time, how much time do you get to do this?
Yes.
How early are you going to be appointed on a job with the new rules, and then how long do you have to sort of finalize it and take it to stage 5 ready for construction? Because with the new rules, you're not allowed to start until everything's fully designed, fully
Gateway 2,
all the technical submittals are done. So I think time would be one of the biggest challenge. In construction, everything's last minute. So far, as much as we have a program, it's the same thing everywhere we go. But it will be interesting to see how developers approach sort of the design stage, and sort of how much time they give us to do this type of work. And I think procurement is going to be, because procurement now essentially, my understanding is part of the design stage, because you're doing those technical submittals, so you're locking in products to the design, maybe a year or 2 years before the project even starts. So that's going to be interesting to see, because pricing a project.
It'd be quite difficult, because you don't know what's going to happen. It's I've seen that quite a lot already, where they're having to put a lot more time at the start, but it does actually hopefully quicken the construction phase up when you do break the ground and start running as such. But
I think that would have that sort of effect. Once you actually get on the project, I think everything should be answered, everything should be fully coordinated. And then if it's the same contractor doing the design, the M&E contractor doing the design, and then doing the construction, which is obviously that's the ideal scenario, then it should be pretty straightforward.
And everyone should follow the plan and design and keep straight. I think that's good. And I think the challenges are being addressed, which is why I know for a lot of people, the Building Safety Act is kind of like, it's a problem more than a solution. But I think it is a solution. It's just going to take time to work out the teething problems and, like you said, the timings of stuff. And it's also, which actually I'll sort of give you a bit of a sort of boost here on this, is why we talk quite a lot, is I think it's highlighted areas where there have been problems, maybe there aren't solutions, and it's allowed people like yourself, you saw an area that was sort of, we're talking about the socket boxes with the box strap. There was an area where there was a limitation with plastic and metal socket boxes, which you've gone and helped design. So now that's opened up a lot more solutions and freedom for designers to use, which, I've credit to you. Obviously, we've got a separate video about the box strap, but I think that where people are doing early engagement, I've been on a project where they were struggling with caddy brackets and the plastic socket box couldn't achieve the required fire resistant rating that we wanted, because they wanted sockets close together. And I was able to provide your solution, and the M&E have been able to include that in their design as such, because it solved a lot of problems. And it's the same thing with ourselves. We're being told about shaft walls Yeah, we've just recently tested a plastic cable tray, which I'd never heard of
Plastic
before.
cable tray.
A plastic cable tray, crazy things like that.
That's new to me as well.
Buzz bars and stuff like that. So yeah, it's the feedback and the collaboration. And obviously, unfortunately, that means there are going to be gaps and problems at the moment, but that's why at design stage, we can see if there's a solution that can overcome it now, maybe change the design slightly. Like, for example, I've been on projects where the M&E wanted to use phenolic insulation for quite large copper pipes, but they wanted a very high fire rating, which we couldn't achieve with that. But if they changed to this certain type of insulation just for a certain distance, then they'd meet the fire ratings. And the MEP, because they've been told at early stage, going, yep, we can do that, here's a submittal. So it's that feedback and that collaboration, but it's also, for cable trays, I'm aware that sometimes we have to include foil face rock fiber around it, like 300 mil length typically. And I didn't know that this had a massive impact on the cables on the tray. And to some MEP guys who showed me some of the calculations and maths towards it, and I was just like, I believe you. Maths isn't my strong
Are you talking
point.
about the current
stuff like that.
capacity, right?
So they've let us know that. So we've tried to look at other solutions, and on some projects, because it was such an impact, they've had to do like risk assessments not to include the foil face rock fiber, and that means lowering the fire resistant rating from an insulation. That's the heat transfer perspective and side of things. But they had to do that at early stage. Fire engineers, building control, the BSR, everyone's involved early to go, are we happy with this scenario? Yeah, okay. And everyone's ticked the box instead of building it, getting there, and then someone going, no, we're not happy, and going back and changing things. So that's been quite good. So yeah, that was some of the challenges. What I have been doing this year is not just trying to focus on the negative, because you've probably seen it on LinkedIn or YouTube, and that is pink phone this, bad installs and all this. So it's a lot of negativity out there, and I feel that's weighing down on people wondering, is there any hope out there? So I like to try and include some positivity as well in all our videos. So focusing on positivity, have you seen any sort of positive aspects with any of the changes, projects you're working on? Is there any sort of, for the audience out there, is there any sort of good news stories we can give them or anything like that?
The Building Safety Act, from my point of view, is positive. Because to the M&E contractor, it just means you're going to actually get appointed early, which a lot of the times you used to get appointed last minute as well.
Yeah.
But it seems like hopefully the positive would be you're going to get appointed so early because they're forced to do it.
Yeah.
And then you can sort of start working on the project, designing it early, and then you will be compensated for it as well, because there is going to be a design budget.
Yeah.
So and sort of having that early input and sort of optimizing a building potentially to an actual install that's going to be more practical. I feel like you can sort of do that at the beginning, so early now. So I think personally it's a positive thing.
Yeah, no, I do as well. I find the positive thing is it's kind of, and it kind of brings you nicely into the next question in a minute actually as well, is the positivity. I think it's showing the right people. So from a design stage, because they need to look for those experts, those competent personnel, that they're speaking to companies that know what they're doing and they've had experience. And it's kind of, like one of the big problems with the inspectors, where they were having inspectors that were never trained to do high-rise buildings, where they were only sort of small residential and stuff like that. So I think the positivity of making sure that the right people are working on the right projects and have the right qualifications and that side of things is good. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about, because we're obviously focusing quite heavily on design here, which early engagement we've talked about quite a lot, and that's why I wanted to include your aspects from an MEP side of things, is but moving on to the install phase, because like you mentioned earlier, a lot of the time the MEPs might be doing the design and then the build as well. So what is your view on MEP contractors also being asked to install like the passive fire protection products as well? What's your take on that?
My view is the fact, my view would be that it's a good approach, but not for the MEP to install the systems. It'll be, because at the end of the day, we're going to get those competent contractors to work with us,
Yeah.
and then we're going to collaborate, work together, coordinate all the systems, and sort of have those early conversations with the specialists, and then to have it under our package instead of the client, which is normally the common practice. The developer would sort of hire the fire stopping specialist, and then the client would be the middleman as such.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
if now the package sort of comes under our banner, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
For us to be instructed to do it, because then we sort of, the culture will change. We'll be more careful about installing those pipeworks.
Yeah.
You make sure they're straight. Going through the letterboxes and that.
Yeah, no, I think that there's got to be a balance between the two. There's some products that we do that are actually more suited for the MEPs to install. So, for example, plastic ductwork very often gets installed a lot, like we've talked about this before we had this conversation, but they'll get installed before the walls go up.
All right,
So we do a QRS fire sleeve that tends to be fitted around the duct at the time that the duct's installed, because make sure the duct's spaced out correctly. Then the wall's built up afterwards. So actually, it's more important that the dry liner follows Quellfire's details, not necessarily the installer of the QRS fire sleeve. And obviously putty pads in socket boxes. I will say actually we're seeing a lot more fire stoppers doing it now than the electricians, but you've also got things like fire pillows inside trunking, which I tend to see that more in the MEP package, because they're going to be filling up the trunking with the pillow, the cables, and then they just slot in any pillows in the gaps. But I suppose again it's that collaboration between what the projects do. So yeah, I think there's going to be a mix of both. One of the things I think is quite important is understanding this competency side of thing. I know it was a bit of a negative word bounced around this year and last year, but it is important. But it's ensuring everyone is competent to do so, and people not getting complacent with the fact that there is very limited qualifications out there for installing passive fire protection materials. I know for MEPs, I'm sure you've had to do lots of qualifications. You've got certain regulations and stuff like that. So you've got to be a competent person to do that side of thing, where passive fire protection, I think people don't realise that a company can be certified. You can get third-party certified thing, but actually the nitty-gritty with the installers is quite limited. So I think, it needs to be a collaboration of, talk to the manufacturers, look at what's being done and that side of things. So, but that's been really good. So I know we focus more on this conversation on design, but I wanted to talk a little bit about construction, because I know there are people watching this now that will be like, who do I put in packages and who do that? But as an MEP designer and contractor, obviously you need to be confident enough to say, yep, we can include that, or no, we would rather, the full fire bat seal going around all the pipework. Maybe that's where the specialists come in, etc. So, that was good feedback and everything. So, I suppose actually that kind of brings us to the end. I know it's kind of a short and sweet episode, but I just wanted to thank you, and not only for this episode, which we've helped me understand the MEP aspect, but obviously the stuff we've done with the box strap and everything in that. So, I don't know if there's any sort of final thought. Like, what do you think is going to happen in the next sort of 12 months? Is there any sort of do you think, obviously you're working on a few projects now, but are you seeing that, it's starting to pick up the construction industry? How do you think the next?
I think sort of the mid of 2025 and sort of back end of it, I think that's when contractors are going to be getting appointed for projects to begin this process of stage 2 to stage 3. At the moment, I feel like there's a lot of projects that, even the last 2 projects that I worked on, it was the standard rules.
Yes, because they came before the changes. So you finding actually, to follow on that, are you finding now, because we talked about being brought in earlier, when do you typically, are you thinking you're starting 12 months before a project starts now? What sort of time frame do you think you're getting?
I think you're gonna get between sort of
obviously depending on the size of the project.
Depending on the size, but I reckon around 4 to 8 months, let's say.
So it's changed quite dramatically to bring you in, but it's good to know. But so thank you once again, Josh, for coming in. So obviously that was a quick overview about the MEP side of aspects for design teams. that we have got some other videos about considerations, like Josh mentioned, from a fire perspective. There's stuff like first service supports, spacing, etc. And we've dived deeper into that in a separate video. As I mentioned, Josh has also kindly done a video with me about the box trap, the benefits about this, and how we've done some testing together and how it helps, especially with metal socket boxes, how it helps a lot of problems that happen on sites. So if you want to reach out to me or reach out to Josh, our contact details will be popping up on the screen now. But thank you very much.